Jamie on the beat, boy. Jamie on the beat, boy. Jamie on the beat, boy.
What's going on, everybody? I'm John J. II, and welcome to the Gin College Podcast. Happy Monday. I'm here with my co-host, Cody Almasi. Cody, how are we doing today, man?
Doing good, brother. Fighting a little bit of an illness, but we're going to get through, going to persevere. Turkey Bowl probably didn't help, but it was damn worth it. Worth the win.
Oh, 100%. We hoisted the platinum platter highly above our heads, winning by a considerable margin, 84-42 in the cold, and the terrain was quite muddy. Like Cody said, he was fighting a little bit of an illness, a little bit of a bug, and still got the job done. Still had plenty of accolades, plenty of stats for everybody on the team, and we fought hard and got the win against Team Conklin, Seth's team. Hell of a time. Turkey Bowl is always a great time. It's a great tradition here at Gin Promotions and with the Gin Sports Network, everything we got going on. It's a great thing that we'd like to carry on, and we had it last year for the first time and had it this year again. So it was a really fun time. I had a blast, and I'm just happy to get the platinum platter for 2 years in a row. So it feels good.
Counting down the days till next year and just honored to be a part of this legacy.
100%. 100%, Cody. You know, and you played a very pivotal role in that win, as did a lot of the players on our team. And it took everybody. It took a team effort to get the job done, and really happy about it. Training camp starts today for next year. So everyone involved knows that. Will they take it to heart or not? That'll be the determining factor going into next year. So let's get into it. We got a really important show for you guys today. Really exciting show. A lot to cover, a lot of different topics, a lot of games, a lot of puzzle pieces have moved. And it's really interesting to see how this is really moving into the final stretch as far as the college football playoff is concerned. We're getting into the final weeks, and a lot of these teams, they're getting solidified in their ranking spots for their respected conferences, and things are getting interesting. But first, we want to talk about Dan Mullen, head coach of the Florida Gators, has been fired. And the University of Florida actually gave him $12 million to stop coaching there. So kind of a interesting statistic, interesting breaking news story there. Cody, what do you have to say about the Dan Mullen firing?
Yeah, it's just the world of college football. It comes at you fast, Mr. Mullen. And it's a long way removed from when they almost beat Alabama in the swamp a couple weeks ago. Not a couple weeks ago, 7-8 weeks ago. It was early on in the season, but you know what I mean. But losing to Mizzou in overtime is just not acceptable. And Florida, they aren't known for accepting mediocrity, and this really proves their point. They joined the long list of coaches, schools looking for head coaches that is going into next season. So going to be interesting storyline for us to follow all off season as these puzzle pieces start to get put in place and new head coaches start to get hired.
Yeah, exactly. And that gives us content to talk about in the offseason for college football. Obviously, college football, college basketball, very big components of this show. I call them the profit-making sports, which basically, in saying that, it's not a bluff by saying that. Those are the sports that give each university the most profit to really host and fund their athletic programs. Basketball and football are the two biggest ones. So it's going to give us some content to talk about the shifting of coaches, how they're going to move. There's a lot of coaches that haven't been fired that are on the chopping block. So we're going to have a lot to talk about in the offseason regarding college football and the coaching staffs and how things are going to change in that regard. So that's going to give us a lot to talk about. But yeah, this is a big one. This is the latest one, the latest and greatest, I guess, if you want to say that, in the college football landscape, to see Dan Mullen go down and to put Florida in a position where they're looking for a new coach. There's a lot of teams that are going to be in that position here soon. So we'll be following this story as well as others that will be happening and breaking as time goes on. But let's move on. Let's talk about the first game on our docket today, Michigan State at Ohio State at the Shoe. Absolutely piss poor performance just right off the bat from Michigan State. Unprecedented, really. Losing 7-56. OSU was -19, over under 68. And I think I was thinking pretty realistically. I knew what this team was capable of. They pulled a couple crazy games out of their hat this year where they did win. But I just wanted them to cover. I thought they could cover 19 points. And Ohio State, they've really grown and prospered into a powerhouse team, not only in the Big Ten, but in the entire college football landscape. So, Cody, what were your takeaways from this game? What did you see, and what were you surprised by, if anything?
Just kind of surprised by how quickly it got ugly, and definitely surprised and MSU's game plan as far as getting Kenneth Walker, the Heisman frontrunner, just the leading Big Ten rusher, third in the nation. He only got 6 carries, and that's insane. He wears your team as a backpack, as I've used that phrase before, and only touching the ball 6-7 times with his one catch is just unacceptable. He's the kind of guy that can change the game and keep you in those kind of games. And to see them, I know you got down 21-0 in the first quarter, so it seems like you got to try and get back in the game quick, get some passes down the field. But Kenneth Walker is an equivalent to a big pass down the field. He can break away. He can spin out of multiple tackles in the same run. And I'm scratching my head seeing this 6 carries in the box score.
Yeah, you're not the only one scratching your head. The underutilization of Kenneth Walker III was staggering. 6 carries for a total of 25 yards, 1 reception for 4 yards. Like these are statistics that you see maybe a second, third stringer coming in, maybe a relief guy getting. That's the kind of stats you expect him to get. And I said this publicly. MSU failed to show up to the Shoe this weekend. I don't know what was going on. And at a certain point, you can only blame so much on the personnel for not being able to get the job done on the field. At some point, the blame goes to the coaches and the coaching staff. And I think that they dropped a huge ball here as far as getting the job done and making things happen offensively, defensively. And to go down 49-0 at halftime is just insulting. You almost, just looking at the score, if you didn't know which teams were playing, you'd think that a major league team is playing some scrub team, some barely Division I team out there. And it just blows my mind to see it go down like this. And this was we were going into last weekend. This previous weekend was the pivotal weekend of college football for a lot of reasons, not just in the Big Ten, all over the place. But to see this happen, I mean, it's over for Michigan State, at least this season. They have a lot of good things to look back at, a lot of things to be proud of. But
Yeah,
not impressive.
I know you guys just signed on. I think your defensive coordinator is Scott Hazelton. He comes from Kansas State, but a game like this against Ohio State is what got Don Brown fired at Michigan after having a couple great elite defensive seasons. A game like this, he was out the door and the season was over. So I don't know if you just need to realign some defensive schemes or get him some new mantra, but some questions have to be answered there. CJ Stroud said he's on record saying he was just chilling back there and wasn't really concerned about being rushed the whole game. And you can't have that. And yeah, definitely got some questions to answer. But as far as the season goes, I think you guys still have a lot to play for, a lot to be proud of, especially when you look at what the expectations were coming in, even from your own fan base, where you're at now. Got to finish the season good against Penn State. So I hope you guys get a crowd out there in East Lansing holiday weekend and finish the season strong, at least the regular season.
Yeah, me too. You look at CJ Stroud's accolades, 32 for 35 catches with attempts for 432 yards, 6 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Absolutely flawless performance from the true freshman. Impressive performance. And this is not the
17
same team.
consecutive completions. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a record. And he just threw his first collegiate pass, 3 months ago when he started the season. So
yeah,
pretty impressive for him.
I mean, he's playing like a seasoned veteran. We were confused. We didn't know how he was going to play out as the season progressed. He's only got better and better every week. So this is a quarterback you got to look out for. You got to watch out for him if you're playing against him. But just to hint towards Michigan State one more time, this was not the same team that we saw play Michigan a couple weeks ago. And I saw glimmers of the same team that played Purdue, but I think this team was even worse than the team that played Purdue. So it was just bad all around. There's really only so much time I really want to allocate towards this, just because I'm so discouraged by their performance. It makes me confused and put into question how they got this far with this many wins in the position they were. So it is what it is. Got to move on. Hopefully they'll get a good bowl game. I'm assuming they will, to play a good prominent team going down the stretch. So it'll be good for them, and it'll be a good learning experience for everybody involved. But yeah, Michigan's got them next. You're going to see me wearing my maize and blue next weekend. And I got a couple articles of Michigan clothing that I wear, but I got in a couple Twitter fights. We talked about this on Friday, but I got more hatred for Ohio State than Michigan. Obviously, they're my own state, and I hate Ohio State that much, where I really don't care who's playing them. I want to see them get beat. And then Michigan has a lot to play for too. We'll talk about Michigan a lot on Friday. So we're going to save a big segment for Michigan and the Ohio State Buckeyes.
I'm already wearing my gear, though. It's Ohio State week. I got to do everything I can to try to get the dub, get some leverage. And at least it's in Ann Arbor. We got that going for us. But
it's right up there.
Ann Arbor, that beat the fucking brakes off us. So I do not want to see that again. Crossing routes, I think, is still Chris Olave. However long ago, I think it's his 4th or 5th year at Buckeyes. He just broke a record. Fuck, man, I'm just getting mad thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about as far as that
Save some of that rage and anger for Friday. We're going to need it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right, let's move on for our next game on our docket. Arkansas, 21 ranked Arkansas against number 2 ranked Alabama. This was a contest. This was a good game. What were your takeaways immediately after watching this game?
I was out and about, couldn't lock in, but I was watching the game cast right on my phone. I'm like the rest of the nation. I want to see the Crimson Tide go down. We'll get to it later, but I actually don't have them in my top 4 for the college football playoff rankings this week. And this performance, they got away. Bryce Young had an outstanding game. He set some records himself for the Crimson Tide, but they needed every single throw, every single yard that he got to get out of there with the dub. Him and Jamison Williams, just that fire connection. He's an Ohio State transfer, by the way, everybody. So just another Buckeye out here doing big numbers. But just how they look susceptible, and how Arkansas, they're 7-4, but they've looked middle of the pack as far as the SEC is concerned, besides a few games like beating Texas A&M, and just the susceptibility to almost taking these losses compared to Ohio State's dominance as of late. Those kind of things are what I factored in. And yeah, Alabama, they got to go. They got to play Auburn for the Iron Bowl this weekend. So things still have to be decided. And yeah, I think Georgia will for sure deliver them another loss if they do, in fact, meet in the SEC championship. So it's all going to play out, but that's just kind of where my head is at. And we're going to give credit to the Razorbacks because they have had a great season in regards to where they've been in the past. Usually, in the last 5 meetings anyway, Alabama has beaten them by a margin of 35 points. So to bring it within 7, they're making strides.
Yeah, definitely. They're on their way. They covered that spread with ease, that 20.5 point spread. Covered it with ease. Only losing by 7 points there. Bryce Young broke the passing yardage record for Alabama in a single game, passing for 559 yards, giving him a 95.4 quarterback rating. Impressive. Second most yards in SEC history. Very impressive statistic there. And looking at the scoreboard, you really wouldn't assume that would be the case. But they went through the air quite a bit. They utilized that pass game quite a bit, and they really made it happen. So the Young to Williams connection is fire, as Cody would put it. 8 receptions, 190 yards for 3 touchdowns. Those accolades are good. That's a game you're going to remember for both of those guys. So you got to be impressed.
40-yard touchdown reception by Williams is what gave him that 7-yard, that last 7-point cushion there. So that's what's going to be remembered. And yeah, Bryce Young is making a case for Heisman as well. I mean, 559 yards. That's what you see total offenses put together in a whole game. So pretty impressive stuff there from the gunslinger for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, they have. Even on the other side of the ball, Arkansas and the Razorbacks, they had a nice little fake field goal for a touchdown. Did you see that?
Yep.
That was beautiful.
In the fourth quarter too.
Yeah, fourth quarter, nothing to lose. They panned over to the Arkansas coach, and he's just smiling from cheek to cheek, and it was a beautiful sight to see. There's obviously holes in this Alabama defense. It's just going to depend if different offenses are going to find it. Like you said, and you alluded to, they got Auburn next week, and they got Georgia the following week going into Selection Sunday. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. Because you look at it with Alabama, with the 1 loss already, they're looking at getting knocked out. They're facing elimination with another loss. I mean, you're not going to stay in the top 4. I don't care who you are, especially Alabama. You're not going to stay in the top 4 with 2 losses, even losing to the number 1 team. So how do you expect that to play out? What are your early assumptions in the Georgia-Alabama game once that comes?
I can't wait for it. That's all I got to say there.
We're a little ways out.
Definitely a little ways out. But all these things will come at you fast. It feels like we were just talking about the Georgia-Clemson game.
No.
But everything is going to play out. I think Georgia's dominant. They're at number 1, but they actually have slid to number 2 in my college football playoff rankings. We'll talk about that later. But, a team like Alabama, a quarterback who can throw for damn near 600 yards, they might push the strength of that Georgia defense to the limits. So I'm excited to see how those 2 teams match up when we get there. Yeah.
Really impressive stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing how those games play out and how the door remains to be opened for the college football playoff top 4. We remain at that top 4 playoff spots to be in contention.
I think there's just too many good 1-loss teams for the committee to allow a 2-loss Alabama, even if they had a great game with Georgia and just barely lost by a field goal. I think you'd have some pitchforks and some people outside of Gary Barta's house if they put a 2-loss Alabama team in there.
Yeah, I agree. I might be one of them. So let's just see what happens. I think that's going to be a really interesting finish. And I think the schedulers knew what they were doing when they put that game at the last game of the season, especially assuming, with a good chance that both these teams would be in contention for the top 4 spots going into the late parts of the season. So we'll have to focus on that, and that'll be on our radar for sure. Let's move on, though. Let's talk about Oregon versus Utah. The Utes bested the Ducks, winning 38-7. We called it. I am just going to toot my own horn right now while I can. We called it. Both of us did on the Gin College podcast this past Friday. We called it. We knew Oregon's days were numbered. We knew that they had the opportunity to lose, and they do. They do every single week. But we knew their days were numbered, and we knew their time would come. What were your takeaways from this game, and what were you seeing when you watched this?
Just a great all-around performance by the Utah Utes. Just heart and that special teams play by Britton Covey, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, sir, but that special teams, that punt return, electric, awesome to watch. Utah, the home crowd was fired up, and they had 7 rushers combined for 50 carries. pretty impressive stuff there. Didn't have a passing touchdown, didn't need one, just ran the ball down Oregon's throat and really exposed the Ducks for what they really are. They're a far cry away from the team that beat the Buckeyes in Columbus in week 2.
Yeah, Utah, I always knew they'd be a powerhouse team. They have the opportunity week in, week out to beat very good teams. They have it all figured out. Their team chemistry is very good. And this game, there's a lot more riding on this than just beating Oregon, getting them out of the college football playoff. Kyle Whittingham, the coach of the Utes, had to win this game to make him the winningest coach of all time at the University of Utah. So they're playing for that too. They're also playing for position in the Pac-12 going into that, and Oregon's looking to see Utah again going into that game for the conference title. So that's another impressive thing, like you alluded to. Britton Covey with a 78-yard punt return as time expired, and you got to give accolades again to Kyle Whittingham, the coach of the Utah Utes. He called the timeout to force that punt just on a hunch, assuming that they could possibly score off of it, and they do. And absolutely, an impressive performance all around. They dominated. They controlled that game the entire time. And it was just a great team performance, really fun to watch. They were hitting hard early. You knew that they wanted to win that game. They came out there wanting it more, and it showed. It showed real evidently. And I was impressed with every part of that game. I had a fun time watching it.
Yep, I always like watching the Utah Utes when I get a chance to see them. Usually they play 10:30 at night for us over here in the Eastern time zone because they're on the west side of there in the Pac-12. But they're for the last couple of years now, even beyond that, they've been right around the top 25 and a good sleeper team in the Pac-12. So love to see this and them to beat the Oregon Ducks, the perennial powerhouse out of the Pac-12 there. And yeah, Cameron Rising, the quarterback, He had a pretty good night, but it's easy when you hand the ball off 50 times. 50 times, that's insane. But Oregon, they still got to go into Oregon State next week and get a win to secure the North over there. So they still have things to get done. Oregon State is no joke either, 7-4. So we'll see what happens. That's for the Platypus Trophy, since it's the beaver and the duck, so they kind of combine the mascots there for the Platypus Trophy.
I see what they did there. Yeah, so they still got some business to take care of in the final weeks. Oregon State is no joke. They beat some good teams this year. And obviously, let's just state the obvious for the people out there that don't know that you're not invested. This loss forces Oregon out of the college football playoff, opening the door to teams like Cincinnati, Michigan, and even Notre Dame, depending on what happens these final weeks. You see Michigan lose, and that knocks them out. Yep. You see Michigan win. There's going to be shifting that goes on. There's going to be more and more shifting going down the stretch or down the line. Things are going to get very interesting, and you're going to see graphics get posted of this is who we had, X amount of weeks left when they did the first release of the college football playoff early rankings when State was in there, Oregon was in there. A lot of these teams are gone, okay? A lot of these teams are gone. You still had Georgia, you still had Alabama in there, but once that game happens, here's another question for you. I don't know how this is going to happen. What if Georgia loses to Alabama? Then what happens?
Then it makes it easier for the committee to put them both in there, unfortunately.
You think they'd still stay in there with one loss against Alabama?
Georgia?
Yeah,
definitely. After this kind of season with so many one-loss teams, and then who do we have sitting outside the back? If Michigan drops out, if then indeed Alabama and Georgia loses.
Oklahoma State.
And wide open. Notre Dame, do you really think that they're going to think that the Notre Dame team sitting there at they'll probably finish 11-1? They don't have to go to any kind of championship game because they're independent. They only played in the ACC last year, which I wish they would everywhere. I wish they had to be in a conference, but that is what it is. But I think the committee, just those biases will hold true, and they would put a one-loss Georgia above Oklahoma State or Notre Dame, or even if the Oklahoma Sooners, they lost to Baylor. But if they beat Oklahoma State and are sitting there at 11 or 12-1 after they win the Big 12 championship, I think they put them in over who were we just talking about? What the hell? Over I think they get snubbed is what I'm saying, or they get that Oklahoma team will get put in there over Notre Dame is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I can see that happening because they're going to bring in conference strength and all those other variables that come into play. And I think those teams that win out in their conference, that are in contention to win their conference and eventually do, that's going to give them more of an edge over a team like Notre Dame that doesn't have to play that conference title game or
Who
even have to
lost to
contend.
Cincinnati head-to-head by 11 points as well. So
Right. So, I mean, I think Cincy definitely gets in before Notre Dame's even talked about.
exactly.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there and how certain teams get shifted around. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of shifting, a lot of movement in this top 4 ranking spots, especially with Alabama and Georgia still to play. You got Michigan, Ohio State still to play this coming week. And Cincy still has to win. Looks like they're going to pave the way to at least a top 4 spot somewhere. And they just got to keep winning, doing what they're doing. They absolutely dusted SMU. I had SMU to cover, and shame on me for that because, I thought 10 points is a lot. SMU, a good team, coming in 8-2, and just get dusted by Cincinnati, Luke Fickell, Desmond Ridder. And they got the job done. They covered with ease. I think it was 48-14 or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that was the only game. I had a 16 parlay. I needed that game to hit for me, SMU, and that was the only one that didn't hit. But it is what it is. Neither here nor there.
And his inflated stats got us a little bit there.
Yeah, they did. They got us, and they got the bookies too, unfortunately. So it is what it is. But let's move on. Let's talk about the Heisman race. Who is in the first place spot? Obviously, I think it's going to be C.J. Stroud after this past weekend. I think you can count KW the third out. Unfortunately, K9, you can count him out, even though I don't want to. I think he's still a great running back, and I think he deserves to be in that position. But with his performance and how he was underutilized, you almost got to blame it on the coaches, blame it on Peyton Thorne, and blame it on a bunch of people, whoever was involved in not getting him the ball to give him the opportunities he needed. Where do you see the Heisman race going, and who's your new pick to win it all?
I guess I'm going to have to go with probably C.J. Stroud as well. Just the flavor of the week after that great performance over Michigan State. And I said that it was going to be C.J. Stroud and Travion Henderson, even though Travion Henderson didn't do much in this game. It was more Master Teague. But it was going to be those 2 Heisman candidates versus Kenneth Walker. And unfortunately for us, the Buckeyes won and looked damn good. But if Michigan finds a way to shut C.J. Stroud down or give him some trouble, force some interceptions, some fumbles. And I think Bryce Young is riding right on his coattails. And there's a couple other guys out there, but those 2, especially after this week, really stepped away from the crowd.
Yeah, they definitely did. It kind of made it easier for the committee, I think, to decide with at least a top 2 or top 3 guys to put in contention for the Heisman race. And it's going to get more interesting down the stretch, just like everything else is. And we're getting down to crunch time where statistics are going to be compiled. Committee members are going to be asked questions. There's going to be votes taken from all these different people that have the deciding power. And we'll have to see what happens. It's going to be crazy to see whoever gets it. Obviously, it's been a very hard fought race this entire year.
I think Kenneth Walker is owed about 40 touches against Penn State to right the wrongs committed in Columbus.
Yeah, he's got to really go off to even be in the conversation, I think, anymore. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And you got to win those games or at least be in contention in the games like Ohio State. You could have still lost against Ohio State and been in contention for the Heisman, but to lose like that and to be underutilized like you were, it's a hard discussion to have. Oh yeah, it's hard to say, oh, this guy still deserves it after a game like that. And it's
you can
unfortunate.
have those kind of games in September, in October, but not in November.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Definitely not now. So we'll be following that story as well. The Heisman race. It's getting more interesting every single week. So stay tuned for that. Let's move on. Let's talk about the Gin Pros playoff rankings, the college football playoff rankings presented by Gin Promotions. Cody, do you want to go through your top 6? And I'll go through mine. I'm going to share my screen here so that people can see what we're talking about, what we're dealing with. And it's getting crazier, man. Crazier and crazier.
Yeah. And our rankings have started to just be a little bit different each and every week as well. So it gives us a lot more to talk about. So the Georgia Bulldogs, for the first time in the Gym Pros playoff rankings, will not be my number 1 choice. I think they've had pretty easy route, sitting there at 11-1 and just really have to face a Bama. So not really to their fault, but just Ohio State's had a harder course and look like the better team right now. I think if they played tomorrow, the Buckeyes would find a way to win. So that's why they're up there. Georgia, like I said, just because you're number 2 doesn't mean I have anything against you. I just think you've had an easier route and kind of walked to this record after taking care of Clemson in week 1. Cincinnati earned some respect from me this weekend, taking care of SMU like that. So I can't really justify putting the team I'm about to talk about in front of them. But yeah, Luke Fickell, Desmond Ritter, like they just still have that one loss to Georgia in a bowl game last year by 3 points, the Peach Bowl. So as much as I'd like to see them get upset, get handed a loss, they're sticking around at number 3 and are undefeated and will look to stay that way going into the American Athletic Conference Championship. At number 4, little controversial here, but I put my Wolverines in there at 4 after a resounding win in Maryland, 59-18 final score. Kind of just plays in 1 versus 4, kind of a college football playoff scenario already going into this weekend. Gives it a little more juice. You know, maybe someone on the Michigan team will see that I put them at number 4, get inspired, and play harder for me. But yeah, I hope the Wolverines prove me right and slide up further after this weekend. But not a tough task, not an easy task at all. It's going to be one of the hardest games they ever play, and I can see Ohio State running up the score on us too. A tradition that they do. I've seen it on Instagram. I'll talk about it more next week. They make their scout team wear winged tee helmets all week. They paint their Buckeye helmets, Michigan helmets for their scout team to play. So that's the kind of hatred they have for us, and that's the energy that they've been playing with since week 1. You know, they think about this game. Ryan Day said he was thinking about this game at the end of the Michigan State game while it was still going on because they were winning by so much. So I am a little weary going into this matchup of the Buckeyes. But Alabama got them at 5, have looked susceptible in the last couple of weeks to LSU and then to Arkansas. And though they're putting up numbers, if they take care of business, you know, Michigan loses, they'll move back up in there. So that's kind of my reasoning. I definitely wanted to give my Wolverines one spotlight in the Gin Pros playoff rankings. But Bama, you'll be in there if you take care of business, you know, beat Georgia. And then number 6, this was a tough one. I had to go and compare a bunch of teams, look at their wins and losses, and the Oklahoma State Cowboys get the 6th spot for me. Only loss is to Iowa State Cyclones by 3 points. And if they wouldn't have lost that game, which, you know, some coaching, an interception, that's what really lost. They lost the chance to score their last touchdown. So they could be undefeated and be right up there in the top 4 if that loss never incurred. So that's why they're going to be there at 6 for me.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And it really can make sense no matter how you slice it with these top 6. And there's a lot of discretion, a lot of decisions have to be made. I don't want to be that guy. I'm glad I'm not that guy that has to make these decisions to put certain teams in certain positions because you can't really quantify what team played the hardest. If they have the same record, what team played the hardest, which team has the hardest schedule to play against. It's a lot to really consider and a lot to compile to really come out with any answer that makes a lot of sense. It's tough to really quantify every single one of these games with all the variables included. So number 1, I'm just keep it simple. JT Daniels and the Georgia Bulldogs, keep them up at number 1 until they lose. Until they lose, I'll keep them at number 1, put Bama at number 2, make things interesting once they face off at the end of the season. A lot can happen between now and then. A couple weeks still left to really get that decided, to see what's going to happen going down the stretch here, especially with both these teams facing off in the regular season still in the SEC to make it happen. So Alabama at 2, I like them there, even winning a close one against the Razorbacks, Arkansas. We'll leave them at 2, put Ohio State at 3 after they, won against Michigan State, my Spartans, by a considerable lead. They deserve to be at number 3 and deserve to at least be in the top 4. I put Cincy in my top 4 too, because I think they deserve it. They beat SMU, a good team, with a pretty cruise control rest of the season. And they're going to fight their way and become, even more prominent. And you bring strength of schedule and things like that into play to put them at number 4, even with no losses, having a flawless season compared to Ohio State and Alabama, both with 1 loss each. It keeps them number 4 just with that strength of conference being compiled in there into the statistics and different variables. Then I put Michigan at number 5. Obviously, if they win this weekend, I think they switch spots with Ohio State at number 3, just because you got to bring that strength of schedule in there as well. That leaves Michigan with 1 loss still going into the following week, which would be December 4th. And I think that makes things real interesting. If Cincy continues to win, leave them at number 4. I think that's a good spot for them. Notre Dame has the opportunity to get in there, especially when Georgia and Alabama play. In my opinion, whether or not each team loses, I think they get dropped out of the top 4. And that might be a hot take. That might be a hard thing to really swallow, a hard pill to swallow. But I think that's how it is. Every single one of these games from here on out is going to carry more weight than any game this season, because we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. Decisions have to be made. You have to be flawless if you're going to stay and remain in the top 4. Once your name and your number's been called to be in one of these top 4 spots, if your number's been called, you have to keep playing well. You have to keep playing flawlessly, putting up insane numbers week after week to retain that spot. And not only that, but you also have to win. So it's going to be interesting to see how that happens and how that takes place. And this is not static. This is going to change. Whatever happens in the next couple weeks, this will change. So that's the most exciting part for me, is a lot of this is going to change. None of this can really stay the same no matter what happens, because a lot of these teams are going to be clashing. Even, with Georgia and Alabama clashing, they're both in the top 4 already. So going to be crazy going down the stretch, man. I like my top 6 though, but I think, we're going to really see where the committee has these teams tomorrow after the rankings get released tomorrow night. But I think it'll be crazy and interesting either way, no matter how you slice it. I'm excited. So the college football playoff is getting more and more exciting. We can say it once, we'll say it a million times. I'll probably say it another 100 times before we get done with the podcast today. But just stay focused on it and stay with us, because we're going to give you guys updates and check-ins all the time, and posts are going to be coming out all the time on our Instagram and different outlets. So make sure you're staying posted and staying in the loop with this. But let's do a college football playoff outlook. Let's look forward a little bit. So Cincy obviously advances to the top 4 with an Oregon loss. Michigan eases its way closer, could secure a spot within the top 4 with a win against Ohio State this weekend. Obviously, it adds even more luster to this game. We talked about it briefly a second ago. We're going to talk about it for a very long segment on Friday, but we have to really emphasize this. There is a lot more to play for than just, rivalry game. This is a huge rivalry. If both teams were 0-11 or 0-12 at this point, it would still be a crazy game. It'd still have a lot of luster. But with how much is to play for, you got the Big Ten East to play for. You got a college football playoff spot to play for. And it's a big rivalry. You put all those on top of it.
Last year for the first time in fucking forever. So
right. So there's all that pent-up anger.
Yeah.
There's that pent-up anger that you didn't get to release last year, no matter how good you did. It's like a ticking time bomb, really. There's a lot more at play at this than what we can even see on paper, basically.
Definitely.
So then you got Georgia and Ohio State fighting for that number 1 spot. Georgia really has to lose to give up that 1 spot. Then the conversation comes into play. Who deserves that 1 spot more? You're going to have multiple teams with 1 loss in there. Who deserves it more? I just alluded to the fact that every game from here on out is going to carry more weight than any game that already happened this season. Is that true? Is that how the committee feels? I don't know. I think that's how it should be. But whether or not that's how they feel or not is a different discussion. Like Cody said, too, this could be a thought process they have. Georgia could possibly stay within the top 4, even with a loss to Alabama, which I think is insane.
Well, last year Notre Dame beat Clemson when they matched up because they were in the ACC. Beat them in the first matchup when Trevor Lawrence was out, and then they matched up again in the ACC championship, and Clemson beat Notre Dame, but Notre Dame still got in as a number 4 team last year. So just stuff like that and antics of the past and just because of how spread out it gets with the teams that do have losses, and how it's basically you got Cincinnati and Georgia undefeated in the top 4, but then besides that, it's all 1-loss teams. And I don't know, with how dominant Georgia's been, if they'll take them out of the 4.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's obviously a proving factor of how the committee thinks, how their thought processes are carried through. And I think a lot of that comes down to Gary Barta and some of the higher ups. Obviously, I think there's a couple of different groups of people. There's different tiers. So they have your analysts, you have your commentators, you have your journalists that kind of give their insight. They're like, oh, this is how it should be because of this and that. Then it's compiled by some of the higher ups. And then Gary Barta and a couple executives, they look at all that information and they're like, you know what, guys? They sit down in their chairs, probably light up a cigar, get a cup of scotch going, and they're like, we have all the control. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks. It doesn't matter what anyone said. We have the control to do whatever we want. and they have to live with it. The entire country has to live with it. These teams have to live with it. These fan bases have to live with it. And everybody that lives, watches, or talks sports has to live with that. So is it probably that dramatic? I don't know. I really don't know what happens behind closed doors, but we're left to speculate. And Gary Barta is really the only one showing his face since he's the head of the committee, talking on ESPN, talking on Selection Sunday. And that's really all it is. He doesn't really have to disclose any of that information to us because we're not relevant enough to the conversation to know or have to know. But what I'm going to ask you, Cody, before we go to some college basketball, before we wrap it up, why do you have Michigan over Bama? Just quantify that for me. In your top 6, you have Michigan over Bama. What do you say, or what do you think is deserving for Michigan to be ahead of Bama in the top 6?
Well, Michigan State doesn't really help my case getting blown out of the water like that by Ohio State, but I just think that Michigan has had a little bit of a tougher path. Like we said, it's kind of hard to quantify that kind of stuff, but I got to have a reason for it. And I kind of said that I wanted the Wolverines to make an appearance in the top 4. And, as much as I would love a win in against Ohio State this week, Ohio State looks like the better team to me right now. I think they could do more damage in the college football playoff. So I think the Buckeyes will win objectively. As a fan, I don't think that. But objectively, I think Ohio State just looks dominant. And so this was my last chance to really get them in there. And besides, Alabama's looks susceptible.
I mean, I think you definitely put them up there. I mean, then it's really up for a conversation. Say Michigan does beat Ohio State. Then how could you quantify Michigan not deserving to be at least the same rank as Alabama, if not higher? You know what I mean? So then that conversation comes into play. I think at the very worst, if Michigan wins this week, they get in the 3rd spot. At the worst, maybe even that's in that 2 spot with the close game Alabama had against Arkansas. Anything can happen against Auburn and Georgia.
Yeah.
So they could lose.
Georgia has Georgia Tech, so I think they'll beat the brakes off another team. But Auburn could muster some kind of magic and like some kick 6 energy from the Iron Bowl back in like 2012 when they took back the kickoff to end the game. I want to see something like that from Auburn and Bo Nix.
Yeah. Imagine this picture. Okay. Imagine this picture real quick. Say Alabama loses to Georgia. They stay in the top 4. Or whatever happens. Say one of those teams stay in the top 4. I think Michigan squeezes its way into the top 2. If they beat Ohio State, I think Cincinnati gets in the 3rd spot. And then, that conversation, it gets so interesting. There's so many different variables, so many different possibilities. I'm not even going to speculate right now until I hear more.
We'll have lots of time to speculate after next week. It'll all be settled for the most part, or there'll be a few left to be decided. But
yeah.
I can see Michigan beating Ohio State, but I know for a fact if Ohio State goes to the Big Ten championship, they'll probably destroy whatever team they play on the West. But I can see whatever team comes out of the West playing Michigan pretty close. So that's just kind of
out of the Big Ten West.
Yeah. It's for like the Big Ten championship. So if Ohio State gets past Michigan, you know what I'm saying? If Ohio State gets past Michigan, boom, they pretty much got it locked. They will not lose. But I could see Michigan using all their energy and motivation, everything, all their heart to beat Ohio State and then coming out playing kind of flat in the Big Ten championship game. I don't like to say these things, but I've learned from being a Michigan fan over the years that stuff can happen, and it scares me to death.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of part of being an analyst, being somebody that talks about college sports, college football, and just being that much into the game by being able to talk about even teams that you love and you grew up loving, talking about them objectively. It's something that's very hard to do, but we have to do it. And that's going to really pose a really big threat. Imagine Michigan wins against Ohio State, like you're saying, then they lose to whatever team is leading in the West. Then what happens to the college football playoff? Then another team gets let in. The door's wide open at that point. Then you're letting 6 and 7 teams in,
or Oklahoma State, whoever comes out of the Big 12.
Because if Ohio State loses, Michigan goes to the college or not the college football playoff, go to the Big Ten championship, and then they lose. They're both out of the top 4.
Yep.
Ohio State is and Michigan. So a lot of different variables. Like I said, a lot of things can happen. A lot of different outside factors that can affect this. top 4 ranking, and Selection Sunday is going to be a crazy Sunday. So I just said it again, maybe not quite going to hit 100 mark, but I said it again. So that's just how it is. So let's just stay focused. Let's not get too caught up in the speculation part. We did that enough. We have our own free time to do that. We'll be posting about it and stuff too. So let's finish up with some college basketball. We're going to keep the topic on your Michigan Wolverines. What happened against Arizona?
Yeah, I think we're a victim of our ranking. A lot of Michigan fans, as well as you, share that belief with me.
Definitely.
Pretty highly ranking coming off of last year's season-ending success. And we're getting shown who we are early. Arizona, 18-point win, 62-80. So convincingly, emphatically, decisively taking care of my Wolverines. And so I'm not really sure where we go from here. We got to kind of take it in the chin, look ourselves in the mirror. It's hard to replace players like Franz Wagner and Isaiah Livers, both on NBA teams now. Franz Wagner looking really good for the Orlando Magic. And key players that are hard to replace, and it's players with the ball in their hands that haven't been used to having these kind of minutes and these kind of situations put on them, on their shoulders. So I think that they'll grow and will be just fine come tourney time, but definitely don't deserve to be one of the highly ranked teams and losing it early if we want to be a 1 seed. So that's just what it is. Hurts to talk about, but got to talk about it,
Yep, you got to talk about it, and it's still very early for college basketball. I'm excited to put my full-fledged effort into college basketball here soon once everything gets wrapped up in the college football landscape. And once we even get to Selection Sunday and bowl games are planned, we got a couple weeks there where there's going to be a lull period. There's not going to be games, not going to be bowl games right away. We got a couple weeks going into the new year even where we have some time to really allocate towards college basketball. So I hope you guys are ready and focused for us to cover college basketball more in depth as we get more time, but we don't want to keep these shows too long. And it's really hot and heavy in the college football landscape right now. So we want to make sure we touch everything we can in that world before we get full-fledged into college basketball. It's kind of the eclipse. It's the crossover. There's a little bit of overlap between college basketball and college football right now. So just bear with us, and we're going to get full-fledged into college basketball soon when the time comes.
Right now, Ohio State Buckeyes beating Seton Hall, who just are newly ranked after beating Michigan last week. They're up by 5 with 8 minutes left. 14th ranked Illinois in trouble, in risk of taking another loss. They are down to Cincinnati Bearcats by 8 points as well, 43-35. So keep an eye on that. Tune in if you want to watch some college basketball. Also got some Monday Night Football coming up.
Yeah, a lot of sports happening later on tonight. You guys will be very interested once you guys get finished up watching this, listening to this. But yeah, let's do some closing statements and we'll get you guys out of here for today on a Monday. Go ahead, Cody.
Yep, everybody enjoy Monday Night Football. I hope the Bucks get back on track. We'll see what happens.
Yes, we will. Make sure to always stay tuned to all of our social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And everything's on our link tree. I'll put our link tree on the bottom of the screen for those of you guys watching live or watching later on. And stay posted. There's going to be some construction happening within our link tree too, to make it more easily accessible and easier to navigate through our link tree, through our different links. So there's some construction going on within our link tree. So stay tuned for that. And always stay posted to all the shows we have here on the Gin Podcast Network, the Gin College Podcast, Double Coverage, the NFL Podcast with Seth and Smitty, and the Gin Sports Network Podcast. All of those well and available for everybody wherever you find your podcast. So stay tuned for that. I'll leave it at that, though, guys. Have a happy Thanksgiving this Thursday, and we'll be in touch with you guys this Friday. I'm your host, as always, John J. II with Cody L. Massey for the Gin College Podcast. Have a great night.